Welcome to Module 12. This module basically consists of the third unit exam, and in this video, I just want to go over the exam and talk about the exam and help you best prepare for the exam. But first, I want to talk about the oral recitation. You'll find an oral recitation in this module along with the exam. And essentially, we're asking you just to read John 1:18 from your Greek New Testament. And so make sure that you practice reading John 1:18 before you hit record. And you might want to go find an audio version of John 1:18 on YouTube. Make sure you look for the Koine, the Erasmian pronunciation of John 1:18. One thing that I see a lot of first semester Greek students make, the one mistake that I see a lot of students make is they read that omicron with a long O sound. And so like exegeseto instead of a short O sound, exegeseta or ha or something along those lines. So whenever you see the omicron, think of like a short O, ah sound instead of that long O, which is where we get the omega. The omega would make that O sound like luo. And so just watch out for that omicron. The exam that's before us basically is focusing on the present and the future tense, but it's also comprehensive. So make sure as you're studying your paradigms, your vocabulary, you go back and you study those words that we've already covered. And so there's really a number of parts of the exam. The first part is vocabulary. And there are going to be 30 vocabulary words that we're asking you to define. And so make sure that you put in the time with your vocabulary. This is the easiest way to get points on the exam. And there's 30 words, 2 points each. That's 60 points of the exam. And if you do the work on the vocabulary, if you put in your flashcard time, then you're going to get a lot of additional help on the translation section as well, because you might know the grammar, you might know the paradigms, but if you don't know the vocabulary, you can't translate. So if there's anything if there's anything that you feel like you need to sacrifice, don't sacrifice your flashcard work and knowing the vocabulary. And you can save a lot of time on the exam. Remember, it's a timed exam, and so if you know the vocabulary cold, then you can get through that section of the exam pretty quickly. The second part of the exam are paradigms. We have 6 paradigms. And so remember, the focus of this unit is on the present active and the present middle passive and the future active and the future middle. Now remember, with the future has a distinct passive form from the middle that we're going to learn later. And so if we see luomai, that could be middle or passive, but lusomai with the sigma, which is future, it is future middle. And so when we ask you to parse a future form, parse it as future middle. If it's present, it could be middle passive or middle or passive. But with the future, it's going to be future middle. Now, you might recall we've only learned 4 paradigms from this section. So luo, the present active, luo, lues, lue, luomen, luete, luusen. The future active, which is the exact same thing as the future, our present, but with the sigma. So luso, luses, luse, lusomen, lusete, lususen. And then the middle passive for the present, luomai, luet, luetai, luamatha, luestha, luantai. The future is going to be identical, just slip in the sigma. So lusamai, luse, lusatai, lusametha, lusistha, lusentai. And so we've only learned 4 paradigms, and so expect 2 paradigms from our second unit. And so think third declension. We're probably going to ask you one of our pattern third declension nouns and a paradigm from the pronoun. So either demonstrative or a relative pronoun or personal pronoun. So make sure that you go back and you review those paradigms from Unit 2. The next section of the exam is parsing. And so I have 7 words for you to parse. And so in the paradigms, we're asking you pattern words. In the parsing, we're giving you more of the irregular forms. And so irregular verbs are verbs that contract or liquid futures. And so when you're parsing and you know that luo paradigm, you can look at the ending to identify the person and number. So for example, poyo, you know the ending is going to be 1s. And then since you know it's a contract verb, there's no sigma, then it's going to be present, active, indicative. And so to determine the tense, look for the sigma. And realize that that sigma might be contracting. So remember the square of stops. So if there's any kind of stem change or change to the stem, that might represent a sigma coming up against a consonant, or it might be an irregular verb. And so that's going to tell you that it's future. So if it looks like the lexical stem, it's going to be present. And if it's contracting, then it's going to be future. Remember, all the moods, the mood for all the verbs on this test will always be indicative. And so we're only going to look at we're only going to look at indicative verbs in 101. We're going to look at non-indicative verbs in 102. So don't forget your free points on the parsing section. Just label them all indicative. And so for the test, remember, please no TV mom. That's our anagram for person, number, tense, voice, mood. And then we're going to get the lexical form. The lexical form is going to be the present, active, indicative form. And then the lexical meaning is going to be the meaning that you find on your flashcard. A little different than what Mounts asks for on the workbook. He asks for the inflected meaning. So, for example, XA would be present, active, indicative, third person, singular of echo, and then the inflected meaning would be he has or she has. The lexical meaning would be I have. And so give us the lexical meaning of the words that we ask you to parse. And then just one more quick note on the paradigms and the parsing. Leave off the accents. We're not requiring you to memorize the accents. And so the acute or the grave or the circumflex. And so a lot of texts, the circumflex kind of looks like a tilde. And so omit all of those. We only want the breathing marks. And so you'll get the rough breathing mark or the smooth breathing mark, and then the iota subscript. You'll find the iota subscript on the present, middle, passive forms. And so make sure that you add that. And then one quick hint on the breathing marks. You'll find a breathing mark on every word that begins with the vowel or row. And so, and you will never find a breathing mark on a word that begins with a consonant other than row. And so, so make sure that you add your breathing marks. Don't lose points for that, and omit the accents. Finally, there's translation. There are 3 sentences for you to translate on the exam. And when you translate, look for the verb and then parse it out and then identify the subject. The subject's either going to be in the nominative case or it's going to be embedded in the verb. And then look for any kind of direct object in the accusative or any other prepositional phrase that kind of fits along with that. And then put it in good English word order. Subject, verb, object, and then add the prepositional phrases after. Sometimes you can put the prepositional phrase before. And then just work clause by clause. And the best way to identify clauses is to look for conjunctions. So like kai or de or a relative pronoun, which introduces a relative clause. And just go clause by clause and then look for the verb that's within that clause. Look for the nominative that could be embedded in the verb, and then add the phrases that are modifying that clause. Remember, the exam is timed, so make sure that you pace yourself. And like I said earlier, one hint is to really go through the vocabulary quickly and make sure that you know your vocabulary, and that gives you a little bit more time to think about your translation and to go through the paradigms. And so make sure that you pace yourself as you work through the exam. If you have any questions about the exam, feel free to raise them with me. Email me. You can get me on Teams as well. And if you have any questions about how the auto grader is treating your exam, just feel free to add a submission note to your exam, and then I'll see it when I grade your exam sometime next week. It's a pretty straightforward exam. If you know the paradigms and the vocabulary, you won't have any trouble with it. In Module 13, we're going to shift and we're going to look at a new tense, the imperfect tense. In Module 14, we're going to look at the aorist tense. And then finally, in Module 15, we're going to look at the perfect tense. And that's going to wrap up our study of the indicative mood. And that's going to make up the material for that last exam that we'll have in December, the imperfect, the aorist, and the perfect tense. That's it. Realize that I'm going to be praying for you guys as you prepare for this exam and as you take it, and I know you're going to do well.